Hi, I'm Martin Jarvis, and once again I want to welcome you to another perspective. Don't follow me, walk with me. That's what we're going to talk about today. We live in a society where everybody's looking for somebody to follow. Somebody that we perceive is more successful than we are, somebody that we perceive has our best interests, somebody that we perceive is exactly where we wish to be, so we follow them and hang on to their every word. But what it seems from observation over these years of my life is that the followers never seem to get there. And I think it's the concept of following that's the culprit. We spoke, I think, in the last program about chasing millions, okay? And the concept of chasing gives you to understand that you don't have it, okay? Now acquiring, that's something else, but as far as chasing, you're never there because you're continually chasing. And I'm going to suggest that it's the same with being a follower. If you're following, you'll never get there. So then why would a leader want followers? And that's what I'm going to talk about today. What I want to suggest today is an individual that needs followers. Well, we want to look at these folks that we've idolized and put up on these pedestals as leaders, requiring followers. And what I want to suggest is that a large ego requires followers, requires worshipers, requires followers. Because what we do, we kind of take human beings and we, in a sense, kind of deify them. And I have to say, I've done it too along the path in my life, because I've looked at people that were really inspiring, and so I began following them and hanging on their every word, and even memorizing some of the things that they would say that just sounded so real. Buying their products, buying DVDs, buying cassettes, all that good stuff, man. And what I came to realize is that if you're following someone, you'll never catch up. So our desire as followers, when we find people that we really admire and idolize, is that we want to be like them. We want to gain what they've gained. We want to have the successes that they've had. But I want to suggest today, when you see a large ego is a mask. A large ego is a mask, masking insecurity. And so this, because it's only a large ego that requires followers. It requires followers for them to be validated, okay? And so one thing about a large ego, masking insecurity, that requires followers, it can't have those followers catching up. Because that would defeat its purpose. That would defeat its need to be revered as this leader. When you are sure of yourself, when you're confident in who you are, you don't need followers. When you're sure of yourself and you're confident in who you are, you don't need people looking up to you and praising you and admiring you and desiring to be just like you. As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. And I want to correlate it to maybe being a parent. As a parent, there are some parents that are intimidated by their children's success. They're intimidated when a child begins to creep up on them and even surpass them, okay? And so that's an insecure parent. And often that insecure parent has before them this mask, projecting a leader, a strong leader, an individual with all the answers, But really, that leader's not going to give their child all the answers because of the fear of that child surpassing them, okay? And so that, it's easier to recognize this concept when you're looking at it from a parent perspective, because a true parent that loves the child, desires the child, it feeds into the child everything that parent has, all of the experiences, all of the life experiences, the downs as well as the ups, trying to ensure that this child is going to avoid the pitfalls that this parent had to walk through. And the reason why? Because the parent desires the child to be better than that parent is. Okay? That parent doesn't need to be the leader. That parent needs to be the giver of insight, the giver of wisdom, to help that individual see, you know. And what's the let me give you another example. For me, as an older person in my 50s, I went back to school and earned my associate degree, bachelor's degree, and my MBA. But what I found in that process, in that journey, was that the more education I had, the more my worldview expanded, larger and larger. And by the time I got to the end of that particular phase of my learning, I found opportunities that I was able to grasp and utilize and make profit from. Okay? And you know, in retrospect, as I look back at those opportunities were always there. Okay? But as my worldview expanded, those things that were always there became visible to me, not because they were invisible, but because of my lack, my limited insight, my limited understanding, my smaller worldview. I was not able to see the opportunities that were before me. So then a proper parent and a proper giver of insight, I don't even want to use the word leader, okay, because that denotes, you know, people following. But I want to say that individual then simply desires to impart so much of their own acquired insight into those that are around him, searching and sometimes not even realizing they're in need of, so that they might begin to see the opportunities that are before them, so they might catch up, and so they might, in a good parent's perspective, even surpass them. Because for me, you know, even coming up as a younger man, as a teenager and a younger man and all, I made a lot of mistakes pursuing fun, pursuing a good time, like many do. And I realize now, in retrospect, that if I had gone down some of those paths, I would be very more well off today. And so then, this is what I try to impart into my children. You know, don't do some of the things that I've done, because this is the result. You don't want that. And so we give that to our children so that they can avoid the pitfalls, so that they can be better than we were, so they can be better than we are, so that when they reach my age, they'll have far surpassed me, okay? And that's what I'm sharing with you today. That's what we need to look at. And especially as followers, we need to find mentors. We need to find the givers of insight that are not ego-driven, requiring followers, but desiring to bring people to where they are and even to surpass them. That's a true giver of insight, okay? And we don't have those today. And we don't have those because the so-called leaders we have today are ego-driven, and they're really not helping you. Okay? They're helping you to stay where you are. They're not giving you enough to catch up. They're giving you a little bit. They're giving you teasers, but they'll never bring you to total success and total freedom. And you know why? Because they're not there themselves. They can't give you what they don't have, but they can paint for you an illusion that they are successful, that they are free. And convince you to follow them, and they'll bring you to that promised land. And I'm just suggesting, how many years is it going to take? How many DVDs is it going to take? How many programs are you going to have to attend? How many classes? How many seminars? What's it take? What I'm sharing with you today, everything that is available to you is right before your face. You just aren't able to see it. Your worldview needs to expand. So you need to find a giver of insight. And that's what I consider myself. That will simply is not trying to create followers, but trying to create folks to walk with. Okay, because there's a reality in this, man. There's a reality in this that I have some insights. I have a lot of insights that I have garnered over the years, and most of them, many of them, through making mistakes and all. But as well, I recognize that wherever I am in life, I still have a lot to learn. And so I have something that you might need to learn, okay? So if I keep you behind me, I am not going to progress. I am not going to evolve because there are strengths that you have that I don't have. There are strengths that I have that you don't have. So when we walk together, we glean from each other. And that is true insight. True insight from a giver of insight, okay? And, I remember years ago, I was a walking mailman in Ohio, okay? And back then, I don't know if global warming is for real, but those winters sure were a lot rougher back then. But I remember there were times, man, it would snow, and the snow would be like 3 feet, it would be 3 feet deep, up to your kneecaps. And you'd still have to deliver that mail. And my route, I was walking 20 miles a day, which is good exercise, in the summertime. But it's rough in that wintertime, especially after that first snow. But what I learned and what gave me encouragement was that I realized that the steps that I was making were the same in the snow, in that deep snow, were the same steps I was going to be stepping in the next day. So the steps that I was making that day, it made my next day's travel a whole lot easier because I would just step in the footprints that I made the day before, okay? And as well, it made it easier for me even to make those initial footsteps because in my mind I'm realizing that tomorrow this is going to be easy. So with excitement, I was making those footprints in the snow, recognizing what it was doing for me personally. And so say I was off the following day. Whoever carried mail for me that following day would be able to walk in my footsteps, okay? They weren't following me. In a sense, they were simply taking the advice from what I had left them, and it worked. And after that day, they realized that the next day they were met in the morning from a night having deep snow, that they could do the same thing that they gleaned from me. So they're not following me. They are learning from me, walking in the footsteps that I prepared before them, but gleaning from that day what they'll do from now on for the rest of their life when faced with those situations. That's what we need to be doing. That's a giver of insight. Okay. So be careful who you're following, and even the concept of following. Now I know in social media that's I'm going to follow you. I'm going to follow you. That's good. That's not really the following that I'm talking about that's detrimental to you. I'm talking about the personal, interactions that you are having with an individual that is actually keeping you behind from where they are. Now when you're on like a social media page or a motivational social media page or Facebook or something and somebody's asking you to follow them and they're putting out words of wisdom, that's different. But when you have someone that's so-called mentoring you for a price, and you're always going to be a follower, you're never going to get there. They're not giving you everything. Have you noticed sometimes you'll find folks, the motivational guys, will be putting stuff out there. But if you really want the real deal, you're going to have to pay for this program, okay? That's what I'm talking about. Now that's okay for like paying for news bulletins or paying for words of wisdom or insight, but if I'm going to sit there and teach you how to be this, and you're paying for it, I'm simply generating lifelong followers, okay? Lifelong followers, and they will never catch up. They'll never catch up, because if I give you what I know that has brought me to this place, then you can do what I've done and you won't need me anymore. Or I can just keep giving you stuff and giving you the illusion of how better off I am. And you'll keep, it's like putting those breadcrumbs out there and you're just following them, expecting one day to get where I am. Or it's like maybe dying of thirst on the ocean and drinking salt water because you're thirsty, You're going to get more thirsty and more thirsty. You're never going to quench that thirst, But we're following. Have you ever been driving down the road and you're on a road that's maybe say 45 or 50 miles an hour, and you're in this long string of cars and you're looking way up front, what's going on, and you see one driver up there just driving along. I can almost imagine, they're looking in their mirror and they're thinking, man, I'm the leader. No, man, you're driving 20 miles under the speed limit. And those folks are never going to catch up because you're blocking their way, okay? You're not making their way. You're not helping them get to where they need to go in a timely manner. You're blocking their way, giving the illusion, especially to yourself, that you are the leader, but you're not helping those people at all. Matter of fact, they're probably cussing at you at the moment. Okay, so I think it's very important what I'm sharing with you today and what I've been sharing. And even from my position, maybe it has been kind of frustrating over the years, because I see I'll be 67 years old this year, 2025, and I'm in pretty good health because I exercise and I eat healthy. I've been doing this for the past 20 years as well. I earned my education from age 50 to 60, associate degree, bachelor's degree, MBA, and I'm constantly striving to learn and to understand more. So even that educational exploit, that endeavor that I did and I succeeded, that really was nothing new for me because I always seek to improve myself. I can't settle for anything not being done or being unsuccessful. I have to make it work. And so I have friends and family members and acquaintances and work acquaintances that I know are not doing as well as they could. And it would be easy if you just do what I tell you, okay? But I know, so I kind of tried to back off of that. But that's all I know. I can say, follow me. And what I do feel very happy about is that, like with my kids, the same way. Except a positive way, is that I share with them everything coming up that I know from all the mistakes I made, all the things that I've done, the good and the bad, not all of the ugly. but what I found most powerful in all of their lives is that I walked the walk. Okay, I walked what I shared with them. Okay. I don't smoke weed. I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't drink alcohol. I don't eat unhealthy. Most of the time I eat healthy, let me put it that way. And so I exercise, and all that stuff I do. And my kid, now my son, like he's cut, So I recognize that the talk part is cheap, but it's the example. And so that's what I try to live, in front of those who might be watching, is try to live the life that I speak. See, I don't preach, I don't teach theory. Anything I talk about, I've gone through it. I could share you the grief, or I could share the joy. I could share you the grief to avoid the things, that I had to grieve through because of my actions. I could also share you the joy of that which I get to partake of because of the right decisions, the right choices in life. I don't know why sometimes. Sometimes I think maybe because we failed a lot in life and we just kind of given up and not trying so hard. And so when someone comes up, and maybe because we've seen so many of those leaders out there just leading people on, and it never panned out, and maybe after 10 or 20 or 30 years, finally say, hey, just give up, I'm just suggesting don't give up. Because I was one of those followers as well. The difference between me, I think, and even when I try to impart, and I hope you're getting this from this conversation here, is that I was, a fan of like the Tony Robbins and the Wayne Dyers and all the many philosophers, and I've read so many books, embraced so many things like Sun Tzu and Lao Tzu and Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Anything that I could get my hands on. And what I found is, when you don't try to follow the individual disseminating this information, the giver of insight, and you simply embrace words that they speak that are applicable to you, you avoid the disappointment of not improving because you're doing everything they tell you to do. And see, that's what I think we're lacking. Even in our nation today, and with the politics, the way you're either a really staunch Democrat or a staunch Republican, and you follow your leader and you follow your party and all that. No, don't do that. Because you're always going to be the follower. You're never going to be enriched. You're never going to be there. You're just living vicariously through your leader. Okay? And it's never going to satisfy you. It might satisfy you during the fervor and the hoopla, but when the dust settles and the smoke clears, you're simply left with the way you've always been. You haven't improved. And so what I'm suggesting is, even in politics, take a piece of that. If the Republican Party has a particular stance on a particular topic, grab that. If the Democratic Party has a particular stance on a particular topic, grab that. But don't just embrace everything, because all you are is a follower, and you're going to be left with disappointment. Man, when I go to the grocery store, which is quite often, I always stop in the magazine section and go through the magazines like Psychology Today or Mindfulness or Runner's Magazine or any kind of martial art magazine. And I look at those magazines, and if I can find one article in those magazines, in a magazine, that applies to me, I'll buy the magazine. Because I don't need to be a follower of the entire manuscript, the entire magazine, but if I can take an article out of there, or even a sentence or a phrase out of there that is applicable to my life, I'm going to embrace it. I'm not going to buy a subscription to the magazine and for the rest of my life. I'm just going to take whatever I need out of it and then improve by that. There are too many followers, too many leaders that are simply presenting a falsehood, an ego that creates a mask of superiority, a mask of success, a mask of freedom, and they convince folks to follow them. And we have been those victims. Don't do that. We want to get there. So don't follow me. Walk with me. And I promise you, I'll just give you everything I know. And especially if you're younger than me, you will surpass me. And to me, see, I'm not intimidated by someone that I may have shared my insights with that surpasses me, because I can say, hey, they got that from me. I don't mind that now. I think I can do that. But I'm not going to keep you down. I'm not going to try to keep you as a follower. Because when you're simply a lifelong follower, you're getting poorer and they're getting richer. Whether it's one of these gurus that we see, one of these motivational speakers, or whether it's a preacher or a pastor in a church, look at the car they drive, look at the car you drive, look at the house they live in, look at the house you live in. And I'm speaking whether it's pastors, whether it's rabbis, whether it's imams, whether it's motivational speakers. They're convincing you to follow them. But if you follow them, you're never going to get there. And even in spite of maybe a poor self-image or insecurity that this so-called leader might have, they're going to maintain this facade, maintain this illusion. And they're always going to be better than you. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. Don't walk behind. Walk with. How's that? Well, anyway, I hope you got something out of this. I do want to thank you once again for joining me for another perspective. And I want to invite you to join me again. You take care.